Okay, so we can easily answer questions that involve being told a value of x and asked to find a value of y. The next thing we're going to undertake is the kind of problem where we're given a value of y and asked to find a value of x. And we're going to have two approaches here. Both of them use technology. One of them is simpler to execute, but only works sometimes. The other one is a little bit more involved, but it'll work every single time. So the first method we're going to use is using a table of values. So we're going to have our calculator create a table of values for us and use that table of values in order to find solutions to the equation. We're going to find the y value we want in the output column and then see what x value is associated with it. So the steps for making a table of values on the calculator are really simple. We'll press y equals and enter our function. We'll press second window and get our table set up. And there's really only a couple of things we need to be sure of. In our table setup, we need to make sure that both our independent and dependent variables are automatically generated by the calculator. And we also need to make sure that our x values count up by 1. So what these two settings do is they tell the calculator to just fill in x and y, rather than us having to type in the x values and then the calculator gives us the y values. What this setting does is this tells us what x counts by. So your x values will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rather than, for example, counting by threes, 3, 6, 9, 12, or going up by a half every time. So a half, 1, 1.5, 2. So that triangle table, this little triangle is another Greek letter. This is the capital delta. It means change. This is just telling us what the change in x as we go from one row to the next is. So if we have these three settings on our table setup, then we can press second followed by graph to view a table of values and use our up and down arrows to scroll through it. Once we have these three settings, they stay set that way. So if all we're doing with the table function on our calculator is creating tables of values like this, we can set them once and just leave them that way forever. The thing that we need to be aware of as we're using these tables is that in general, when we're solving a quadratic equation for x, it's possible that we don't get any solutions at all. It's possible that we get exactly one solution. And kind of the normal thing to have happen is that we get two solutions. So that means that just because we found one solution in our table doesn't mean that we can stop. So I went over that process a little bit quickly, and that's because we're going to actually do an example. So in example 8, we came up with the equation y equals negative 5x squared plus 100x to describe the relationship between y, a company's revenue in thousands of dollars, and x, the price they set for the item in dollars. Now we're going to use a table of values to find the price the company should set to get a revenue of $480,000. A revenue of $480,000, that's telling us a value of y. Find the price, that's asking us a value of x. So we're given a value of y, asked to find the value of x. We'll plug in 480,000 for our y. We need to solve 480 equals negative 5x squared plus 100x. Why just 480, not 480 and then 3 more zeros? because Y is in thousands of dollars. So Y equals 1 means a revenue of $1,000. Y equals 480 means a revenue of $480,000. So going to the calculator then, we're going to hit Y equals. And when we did the last example, we actually stored that equation in the calculator. So we already have it in. If you've done something else in the meantime, or if you didn't store that equation, we can just type it in. Negative 5x squared plus 100x. And we're not going to bother typing in plus 0 because that plus 0 doesn't do anything. Okay, now we have our equation in our calculator. Next, we need to make sure that we have our table set up properly. So we're going to hit second, followed by the window key. And we're going to make sure that delta table is 1, independent is auto, dependent is auto. These are the default settings. So if your calculator is new, it might just be set to this. If you have a calculator that you've been using for a while, or if you have a rental calculator, they might have some other settings. To change these, just scroll down to what you want to change. You can just type 1 for delta table. If you have ask selected, just put the cursor over auto and hit enter to select auto. Okay, we have our table settings. Now we're going to hit second, followed by graph to actually get our table of values. And if you have the lower resolution calculator, you might not see a row yet with y equals 480. We know that only positive values for x make sense, right? If the company sets a negative price for the item, they're not going to make any revenue. So we know we only want to look at positive values for x. If you don't see a row with y equals 480 on screen, just use the down arrow to scroll down until you do. But on the high resolution screen, we see a row where y equals 480, and the x value in that row is 8. So we see that x equals 8 is a solution to the equation. Okay, this is a quadratic function. We found one solution. Do we expect to see another solution? Well, our y values are increasing, but they're slowing down. So we expect this function to increase and then decrease. So we think that y is going to increase past 480, which we see here, but then it's going to come down again. So we expect it to go up and come back down. We want to scroll down on the calculator and see if we can find another solution. So I'm going to use the down arrow key to scroll. All right, so here's that x is 8, y is 480. Keep going. And then if I keep going off the bottom of the page, it just scrolls the list. So I keep going. Oh, and there I see another row where y is 480. And so we see the second row where y is 480. And in that row, we see that x equals 12 is also a solution to the equation. Now we can actually check that that's true. Right up here, we can check that negative 5 times 8 squared plus 100 times 8. I'm going to hit second and then quit to get back to the main screen. Say negative 5 times 8 squared plus 100 times 8. That really is 480. Down here we can check that negative 5 times 12 squared plus 100 times 12, negative 5 times 12 squared plus 100 times 12, also 480. So those really are solutions to that equation. They really do work when we plug them in. And we can give them interpretations, just like we would solutions we found it by hand. So our goal was y equals 480. That is, the company has a total revenue of 480,000. And how do they achieve that? Well, by setting x equal to 8 or x equal to 12. X represents the price of the object. So by setting the price as either $8 or $12, either price will get them the same revenue. Priced at $8, they'll sell more items. Priced at $12, they'll sell fewer items. Either way, they get $480,000 in total revenue. So this method has the advantage that it's pretty easy to make the calculator actually do it. It has the disadvantage that it only works for the numbers that show up in this table. So for example, if we want to find the price they should set to get a revenue of $350,000, looking back at the calculator, why can't we use this table to find the price they should set to get a revenue of $350,000? Well, looking here, at a price of $4, they get a revenue of $320,000. At $5, they get $375,000. 350 is somewhere in between there. They need to set a price somewhere between $4 and $5 to get a revenue of $350,000. But from this table, we can't figure out where. Maybe after it turns around, but no. At a price of $15, they have a revenue of $375,000. At $16, they have $320,000. So again, somewhere between $15 and $16, they hit revenue of $350,000. But we can't see it in the table. So why can't we use this table to find the price they should set to get a revenue of $350,000? Because y equals 350 doesn't appear in the table. Why does y equals 350 not appear in the table? It doesn't correspond to a whole number value of x. In fact, in general, if a certain y value doesn't correspond to a whole number x value, we expect it's going to correspond to some really ugly value of x, some ugly decimal. So we're going to end up rounding. We can't see it in the table. In order to find the price to get a revenue of $350,000, we need another technique. But there is one other thing we noticed. When we have a quadratic equation, so one that includes quadratic functions, the normal thing to expect is to get two solutions. The normal thing to expect is that we have two values of x corresponding to any particular value of y. Occasionally, that's not what happens. Occasionally, we only get one, or we might not get any. But that usually means there's something wrong with the question we're asking in the real world.